The night yawned open, swallowing the last sliver of light. Stars pricked through the inky blackness, cold and indifferent witnesses to the solitude of Highway 70. Wind howled a mournful song through the trees lining the roadside, their skeletal branches swaying in a macabre dance. A lone semi-trailer rumbled past, its headlights momentarily piercing the darkness before fading into the distance, leaving behind an even deeper sense of isolation. This stretch of desolate highway, snaking through the heartland of America, whispered tales of darkness, tales of lives abruptly cut short, of terror lurking in the shadows. It was a place where evil found its hunting ground, preying on the vulnerable and unsuspecting. A place where Larry Eyler, the man they called the Highway Killer, transformed ordinary journeys into nightmares. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and chilling. It was the scent of fear, clinging to the asphalt like a phantom. For those who dared to travel this road alone at night, the fear was a constant companion, a whisper in the back of their minds reminding them that monsters were real, and they lurked in the shadows, waiting for their next victim. Larry Eyler's journey into darkness began in the seemingly ordinary town of Crawfordsville, Indiana. Born in 1952, Eyler's childhood was anything but idyllic. His alcoholic father and emotionally unstable mother created a volatile and abusive environment. Young Larry, caught in the crossfire of their toxic relationship, retreated into himself, seeking solace in solitude and fantasy. As Eyler grew older, his troubled home life manifested in behavioral problems and run-ins with the law. He developed a pattern of petty theft and vandalism, a cry for help that went unanswered. Behind his quiet demeanor, a storm raged within him, fueled by a potent cocktail of anger, resentment, and a profound sense of inadequacy. Psychologists would later point to Eyler's chaotic upbringing as a breeding ground for his violent tendencies. The constant instability and lack of a stable support system left him emotionally stunted, unable to form healthy relationships or cope with stress in a constructive manner. His pent-up rage festered, waiting for an outlet, a trigger that would unleash the monster within. That trigger, it seemed, was the open road. The vast, unending stretches of asphalt, the sense of anonymity, and the promise of adventure all combined to create a perfect hunting ground for a predator like Larry Eyler. In the early 1980s, Larry Eyler embarked on a reign of terror that would span multiple states and claim the lives of at least 21 young men. His crimes were not confined to one area. They spread like a dark cloud over the Midwest, leaving communities in a state of perpetual fear and uncertainty. His modus operandi was chilling in its simplicity. He would cruise the highways and byways of the Midwest, searching for hitchhikers or vulnerable young men looking for companionship. These roads, often isolated and desolate, provided the perfect cover for his heinous activities. Eyler's charm and seemingly harmless demeanor made it easy for him to gain the trust of his unsuspecting victims. Luring them in with the promise of money or drugs, Eyler would then unleash his pent-up fury, subjecting his victims to horrific torture and abuse before discarding their bodies like trash along desolate stretches of road. The brutality of his actions was matched only by the coldness with which he disposed of his victims, showing a complete disregard for human life. The crime scenes were gruesome testaments to Eyler's brutality. Bodies were often found bound, gagged, and bearing signs of unimaginable torture. The sheer savagery of the attacks left even seasoned investigators shaken. Each new discovery added to the growing horror, painting a picture of a man driven by an insatiable need to inflict pain. Stab wounds, lacerations, and burns spoke of a rage that knew no bounds. The meticulous nature of the injuries suggested a methodical approach, as if Eyler took a perverse pleasure in the suffering of his victims. The evidence left behind was a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity. Investigators were horrified by the sheer savagery of the killings, the level of depersonalization indicating a deep-seated hatred and a complete lack of remorse. The psychological profile that emerged was one of a deeply disturbed individual, whose actions were driven by a complex mix of anger, hatred, and a desire for control. As the body count rose, so did the fear. Panic gripped communities across the Midwest as rumors of a highway killer spread like wildfire. The media coverage only added to the hysteria, with headlines screaming of a monster on the loose. People began to look over their shoulders, wondering if they or someone they loved would be next. Parents warned their children about the dangers of hitchhiking, and truckers, once beacons of camaraderie on the open road, eyed each other with suspicion. The sense of community that had once defined the highways was replaced by an atmosphere of fear and mistrust. Every stranger was a potential threat, every friendly gesture a possible trap. The highway, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, had become a hunting ground, a place where evil lurked in the shadows. The open road, with its promise of endless possibilities, had been tainted by the actions of one man, leaving a legacy of fear and sorrow that would haunt the Midwest for years to come. The investigation into the highway killer murders was sprawling and complex, hampered by the transient nature of Eyler's crimes and the lack of a centralized database for sharing information between jurisdictions. Each crime scene, scattered across various states, presented its own set of challenges, making it difficult for law enforcement to connect the dots. The lack of communication and coordination between different police departments only added to the confusion, allowing Eyler to continue his killing spree undetected for longer than anyone could have imagined. Law enforcement agencies across multiple states found themselves grappling with a seemingly unconnected series of murders, each bearing the chilling hallmarks of the same depraved mind. The randomness of the locations and the varying methods of disposal made it seem as though the murders were the work of multiple individuals, rather than a single calculating killer. This misdirection played into Eyler's hands, allowing him to evade capture and continue his reign of terror. As investigators struggled to connect the dots, whispers of terror echoed through the gay communities of Chicago and Indianapolis. The fear was palpable, with many feeling that they could be the next target. The streets, once bustling with life, became eerily quiet as night fell, with people choosing to stay indoors rather than risk becoming another statistic in the growing list of victims. Eyler, it became clear, was specifically targeting young men who frequented gay bars and clubs, using their vulnerability and desire for connection against them. He would often charm his way into their lives, presenting himself as a friend or potential lover, only to reveal his true monstrous nature when they were at their most vulnerable. This predatory behavior struck fear into the hearts of many, making them wary of strangers and even friends. Fear and suspicion ran rampant as rumors swirled about a killer stalking their community, preying on those who were already marginalized and ostracized by society. The media coverage only added to the hysteria, with sensational headlines and graphic details painting a picture of a community under siege. Meetings were held and safety measures were discussed, but the sense of dread remained, casting a long shadow over the lives of many. Amidst the fear and uncertainty, some survivors of Eyler's attacks came forward, their stories painting a harrowing picture of the killer's modus operandi. These brave individuals recounted their encounters with Eyler, describing in chilling detail how he lured them in with his charm, only to turn violent and controlling once he had them in his grasp. Their testimonies were a crucial turning point in the investigation, providing law enforcement with the insights they needed to understand the mind of the killer. They spoke of a charming and charismatic man who could quickly turn violent and controlling. His ability to switch from a friendly demeanor to a menacing presence was both terrifying and bewildering, leaving his victims in a state of shock and confusion. This duality made him all the more dangerous, as it allowed him to blend in seamlessly with his surroundings, hiding his true intentions until it was too late. They described his cold, calculating gaze, the glint of madness in his eyes, and the terrifying ease with which he inflicted pain. This haunting image of Eyler, as recounted by his survivors, painted a picture of a man who took pleasure in the suffering of others, deriving a twisted sense of satisfaction from their pain and fear. It was this sadistic streak that made him such a formidable and elusive adversary for law enforcement. Their accounts, while chilling, provided crucial pieces of the puzzle, helping investigators to slowly piece together a profile of the elusive killer. Each detail, no matter how small, brought them one step closer to understanding the mind of Eyler and predicting his next move. The survivors' bravery in coming forward not only aided the investigation but also offered a glimmer of hope to a community living in fear, showing that even in the darkest of times there is strength in unity and resilience. The break in the case came in 1984, not from a meticulously planned police operation, but from a chance encounter and a stroke of luck. It was a year marked by heightened tension and fear, as the community was gripped by the terror of a serial killer on the loose. The police were under immense pressure to solve the case, but little did they know that a routine traffic stop would change everything. On a sweltering August day, Eyler, accompanied by a young man named Daniel Bridges, was pulled over for a minor traffic violation in Lake County, Illinois. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the air was thick with the heat of summer. The officer, performing what seemed like a routine check, had no idea that this stop would unravel a web of horror. The officer, sensing something amiss, asked to search Eyler's van. His instincts were sharp, honed by years of experience on the force. There was something about Eyler's demeanor, a certain unease, that set off alarm bells in the officer's mind. He knew he had to proceed with caution. Inside, he found a grisly toolkit of ropes, knives, and other items consistent with the evidence found at the murder scenes. The discovery was chilling, a macabre collection that painted a picture of unimaginable cruelty. Each item was a piece of the puzzle, linking Eyler to the heinous crimes that had plagued the area. While the evidence wasn't enough to charge Eyler with murder, it was enough to arrest him on suspicion of unlawful restraint and battery. The arrest was a small victory, a glimmer of hope in a case that had seen so many dead ends. Eyler's mugshot, taken that night, would become a symbol of the breakthrough the police had been desperately seeking. Bridges, initially reluctant to cooperate, eventually broke down and told investigators a chilling tale of torture and abuse at the hands of Eyler. His story was harrowing, filled with details that sent shivers down the spines of the seasoned detectives. It was a narrative of fear and pain, one that added a human face to the cold, hard evidence. He led police to a shallow grave where the body of another victim, 23-year-old Ralph Calise, was discovered. The scene was somber, a stark reminder of the lives lost and the brutality inflicted. The discovery of Calise's body was a turning point, providing the investigators with the concrete evidence they needed to build their case. The walls were closing in on Larry Eyler. The once elusive predator was now ensnared in the very trap he had evaded for so long. The community, once paralyzed by fear, began to feel a sense of relief as the net tightened around the suspect. The hunter had become the hunted. Eyler, who had once prowled the streets with impunity, was now the one being pursued. The tables had turned, and the relentless pursuit of justice was closing in on him. As the evidence mounted, so did the pressure on investigators to secure a conviction. The case had become a high-stakes battle, with the eyes of the nation watching closely. Every piece of evidence, every witness testimony was scrutinized with the utmost care. They had their man, but proving his guilt in a court of law would be a long and arduous battle, one that would test the limits of the justice system and expose the dark underbelly of America's heartland. The trial would be a defining moment, not just for the investigators and the victims' families, but for the entire community that had been haunted by Eyler's crimes. The pursuit of justice was far from over, but the capture of Larry Eyler marked a significant step towards healing and closure.